My name is Alex Howard. For nearly 20 years, I've been a therapist here in London. I am deeply passionate about helping people make real, positive change in their lives. Having been through therapy myself at different stages of my own life, I know how transformative it can be. That's why I started In Therapy, a series that follows the stories of brave participants as they go on therapeutic journeys with me. Join us as we go behind the scenes as people grapple with issues like depression, anxiety, and chronic illness, and join my mission to break the stigma around mental health and asking for help. This is In Therapy with me, Alex Howard.
What can I say? It's Friday evening. I've had a couple of drinks and I'm in charge of a razor. Exciting, isn't it? God knows what my inner critic thinks about this. God knows what you think of this. But yeah, things have been pretty strange. I didn't think this lockdown was going to affect me as much as it has. But yeah, it's been tough. And the fact that, I don't know whether I'm going to get to see my family for Christmas is sort of preying on my mind, I guess. I think coming so close to my birthday and it being my first birthday without my father, and now we're looking at the first Christmas without my father, and I'm really, really worried that I won't get home and that my mum will spend it on her own. I mean, obviously, my sister and her kids will be there and they'll make a fuss of them and stuff, but at the end of the day, it's more than just that couple of days over Christmas. It's, there's always going to be that point where, the Christmas meal is over or whatever, and everyone goes home to their own houses, and Mom's going to be stuck on her own for the first time in 50 odd years. So yeah, and I don't want that happening, and that's all preying on my mind, I think. There's something really restful about shaving your own head, but if you buy the cheap ones from, some discount superstores, it's also quite exciting because you never quite know when you're going to scalp yourself.
David, good to see you. How have you been since last time? I mean, we've obviously been in the second lockdown, and I know for a lot of people that's been challenging. I'm just sort of wondering how you've been.
Yeah, it's been a bit strange. It had been my birthday, and obviously that was the first big sort of date worth noting in terms of my dad dying. So that was like my first birthday after my dad dies, and this will be the first Christmas after my dad dies.
Yeah.
And I thought I was fine with that. And then about a week later, I just felt really shitty about the whole thing. And earlier, sort of in the last couple of months, I've been feeling guilty and stuff, and I wasn't feeling that anymore. But yeah, I just felt bad.
So last time we were particularly talking about anger and talking about that as being an emotion that's been there a lot and is there a lot. And I asked you to do some homework around watching the module 6 and around the noticing how you're responding to and what you're doing with your emotions, particularly your anger as it comes up. And I was sort of curious as to what came from that.
I'm the only one that I really fester with.
Right.
You know. So if I'm angry with myself about something, that'll, snowball. And then there's other things that I'm probably angry about, which it's really a sort of impotent anger. It's an anger that, I don't know what to do with. So it's like, having strokes or having disabilities or, whatever, it's like, there's no one really to fucking tilt against with that one.
But you see, I think that's the anger which is most relevant here, right? There's the anger about disability. There's anger probably about your dad dying and particularly the circumstance of how things happened. There's maybe some anger about historical relationships and how things sort of didn't go the way that you might have hoped. And that anger not felt doesn't just disappear. It gets held and it gets stored in your body, and the fact that the anger is not going to change anything, the fact that on one hand, yes, it's true, the anger around a disability is impotent because getting lost in the anger doesn't change the reality of the disability. But also you can't heal what you don't feel. And I don't mean about healing the physical disability, I mean the emotional impact of it. But it's got to go somewhere. And it's like, I think what's happening is that there's a sort of what feels like an impotent anger and frustration and rage that certain things in your life didn't go the way that you wanted them to go. And didn't go the way that you could rightfully have expected them to go as well. There's a sort of unjustness in that, but not feeling it means that it's just sort of left and then you find yourself becoming reactive and irritable about other things in life. And in a sense, you then find yourself in a place where you're emotionally feeling angry and irritable and annoyed, but it also then gets in the way of the things in your life that you might otherwise change and you might progress and might move forwards. And as we talked about previously, the depression almost becomes a consequence of the stuckness of those feelings.
With my dad, it's like, I feel angry about a lot of things, but they got a lot of tests in a sort of fairly tight, like sort of 4-month period. And, so it's not like a kind of case of like, oh, well, if only they had looked at this 2 years ago, because there was nothing to, so I can't blame the doctors.
But you see, what I hear you doing is you're trying to look for a rational place to place your anger.
Yeah.
Right? But I think it's more simple than that. I think the anger is that your dad died and you didn't want him to die. And your dad died in a circumstance where you didn't get to be by his side and be with him in his moment of passing.
Yeah.
I think the rest of it's just noise. I mean, to me, that's the truth of what I think you feel angry about. And anger doesn't need permission to be placed at the door of, oh, it's the doctor's fault or it's the pandemic. Like, there's just the truth that you lost your dad earlier than you expected to.
I mean, he was 70 though.
Yeah, but normally, I mean, I'm not sure that's an average normal example, but generally speaking, that there's a sort of someone gets ill and there's a period of time and you get to go in an ideal, death, the ideal scenario of death, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess there's a cathartic
there's this sort of natural process, and I think it's much more traumatizing when it just happens and there's sort of no there's no preparation and journey and time to have that sort of processing. But beyond even that, losing someone that we love hurts. Even if we've got the perfect scenario, in as much as there's lots of warning and time and we get to be there at the moment of their passing, and it's like a Disney movie, they just pass in there, even then, there's still the anger of we didn't want that to happen. And I think also with the disability side, it's like, again, you can go into the place of the story of being angry at the doctors for the misdiagnosis and being angry at the sort of confusion and frustration and all of that. But I think, again, it's simpler. It's like, it's the anger of your body not working the way that you want it to work.
That's always been the way I felt about it. It's, I've never felt angry about the doctors or anything like that, or the misdiagnosis or anything like that. It was that's just what happened. What
I'm wanting to sort of put the spotlight on a little bit is the not fully dealing with the anger means it leaks out in these other ways, and you end up making at times poor choices in moments where it's sort of fueled by that sort of underlying sort of anger and frustration that's there, and there's then a sort of numbness and emotional shutdown that comes in, which then results in the sort of feeling depressed and hopeless and pointless. And you see, I think there's also a lot of energy in anger. Anger is a very fiery, powerful, strong sort of energy. And when we kind of shut it down, we're also shutting down an element of our creativity and our energy and enthusiasm for life, in a sense. What did you notice in the homework in terms of what you tend to do, what the strategies are that you use when feelings and emotions come up?
Just ignore them.
Okay.
Or try to ignore them.
Ignore them by doing what? By distracting yourself? By how?
Yeah. I'll try and read a book, or I'll try and watch a film, or I'll,
Yeah. So what I would
heroically drunk or something.
Yeah. Right. So I talk about what we call the 6 emotional styles of disconnection or emotional disconnection. And so one of them is avoidance and distraction. So you feel something that feels kind of uncomfortable, so you distract yourself. You read, you watch telly, you go on social media, whatever it might be. Number 2, and we've talked about this previously, is you drink. Yeah. So you state change. You change how you feel by using, for example, alcohol as a way of doing that. What else do you notice that? I mean, I something that I noticed that you use, and don't get me wrong, I appreciate it, but I also notice that it's a strategy, is you use humour. Yeah. So something comes up and you'll be self-deprecating, or you'll sort of kind of, make a sort of joke out of it. And it's also a sort of way of sort of distracting away from it.
Yeah, but I only do that with other people.
You say you only do that with other people?
Yeah, I don't really do that when I'm on my own.
Okay. Right, that makes sense. That makes sense. Are there times that you do let yourself feel more of your emotion, like more particularly the anger side of it? Like, are there times you could think of where you have just let yourself hang out in that place of just feeling angry?
I'm in a mental health network at work, and there's a sort of subgroup that are talking about this idea of it's okay not to be okay, which, it's okay not to be okay. And the thing that occurred to me is that it's okay sometimes to just kind of shut the door and have a wee cry.
When you do that, do you feel, what do you feel afterwards?
Catharsis.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of sort of, I don't know if release the right word, but yeah.
So that's sort of feeling more a sense of sadness.
Yeah.
It sounds like. How about anger? Do you ever let yourself scream into a pillow? Do you ever let yourself take the baseball bat and whack the bed? Like, just sort of let yourself have the anger, like as opposed to the sort of the story of what you're angry about, like just like let yourself have the feeling of the anger.
Yeah, I don't really do that.
What do you think would happen if you did?
Probably smash a room up.
Well, I would propose doing it in a controlled, considered way.
Apparently you can now pay to go and smash a room up.
Yeah, I forget what do they call it.
They've got one in Vauxhall or somewhere where and it's just that you go to a warehouse or something and they just set up a room for you and you just smash it up.
I've seen it.
And maybe I should do that, but yeah, I don't really hit pillars or something.
So when it comes to releasing and processing emotion, there is a very, very fine line, subtle line between acting it out and just sort of acting out being angry and sort of it's almost being a way of avoiding the emotion because you're sort of playing out the story of the emotion.
Yeah.
And actually feeling the emotion. When we act out the emotion, when we sort of go into sort of the whole story, we often end up more annoyed at the end, not less annoyed. Like we almost get fueled by the sort of the anger and the irritation, which is different to actually really being in touch with it and feeling it and processing it in such a way that we actually feel we've moved it. Like it's like I don't want to sound too hippy dippy, but it's like a sort of energy that's in us, which has been metabolized. Like when you feel sad and you cry, and on the other side, there is a sense of release and relief that one feels that there was something that was sort of being bottled up and held onto, which has been metabolized, and there's a processing of that. That's what we're looking for when it comes to anger. That it's not sort of getting in a sort of whole story and drama. And that this isn't really a comment on whether you go and smash up a room or not, because I think there probably could be quite a healthy thing for you to do, and it could be quite a fun thing to do. But it isn't necessarily the same as actually metabolizing and processing the anger and the emotion that's being held onto. And that anger is, I use the analogy of it being a sort of in a black sack. That anger is there in your body, and that's why it's leaking out in these different ways. Sometimes in slightly passive-aggressive ways, sometimes in sort of overreacting to small things, sometimes in your inner critic turning that anger against you. But it's there, and it's in your body, and it's in your sort of experience. And until we metabolize it, until we digest it and sort of break it down, it's gonna keep being there in those ways.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something about, and I think it's an important ingredient in this, you don't trust your anger, right? No. There's a potentially, in some ways, appropriate fear of when your anger's being used in unhelpful ways, that you've caused hurt to other people. You've either said things online that you've regretted, or you've been on the underground and had an overreaction to someone. That there's a sense of your anger is dangerous in a sense. And I think what I want to do is to sort of slightly reframe that in such a way as your anger untethered and expressed in an unhelpful way is dangerous. But I'm categorically not sitting here and giving you permission to throw your anger out at people.
Yeah.
That's just going to cause more pain to mop up.
Mm-hmm.
But it's sort of like at the moment there's sort of two choices. There's throwing your anger out at people, which is happening from time to time, but ultimately you don't want to be doing. Or there's locking it away in the basement and sort of pretending it's not there. And what I'm proposing is that maybe there's a third way. And there's a way where there's taking some time to understand it, to make some sense of it, to feel it, to metabolize it. But it's almost like what you resist will persist. The more that you reject and ignore, it doesn't just disappear, it just leaks out in these other ways. I'm interested with what's happened this year, for example, with your dad passing and also having lost several friends, lost your cat, like the various sort of losses that have been there. How at this point are you feeling about that? You were mentioning, for example, in the lockdown, you've had your birthday that sort of passed, and I'm just interested to hear a bit more of what you actually have been feeling about all of that.
I mean, I suppose there's a certain amount of anger and there's a lot of sadness. But I think you're probably right. I think I probably haven't really been looking at it too much.
Yeah.
It kind of feels quite big. And also it's...
Well, it is big.
Yeah.
It is big. It's big stuff.
It feels almost insurmountable. You know, my father's died. 3 close friends have died. My cat's died. Workmates have died. You know, it's like, that's a lot. Yeah. You know, it's...
I hear what you're saying, that it almost feels too much to sort of metabolize and process. But one has to start somewhere in that process. You know, it's sort of like, how do you eat an elephant? Well, one mouthful at a time. Like you've got to start somewhere with what's there. And I sort of wonder how much you've talked to friends, or how much you've sort of sat and reflected in yourself about some of the events, or if it's sort of been well, that happened, can't fix that, need to sort of get on with things.
Yeah, there's one friend who I saw back in August, and you know, we would meet periodically, and yeah, I would talk about that kind of stuff with her in the pub.
Yeah,
but probably wouldn't do it online, or wouldn't do it in a phone call. You know, again, I've got another friend who, you know, if we go for a pint, I would talk about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just me talking to them, they would talk to me about this kind of stuff.
Sure.
But it's like, yeah, we don't really do it online or do it on the phone.
Yeah. And there's a sort of exasperating of everything this last 9 months, because you've been through these really intense things at a time where you've been the most isolated from the support network that would normally be there for you. And I think, you know, part of it obviously is talking about it. I also wonder, do you ever write about how you feel? Like journal? Like just record your thoughts and your emotions in a sort of written format?
No. I have on occasion written expansive apologies to people, which usually is not a good idea.
It's not normally a good idea to send them, but it doesn't mean that writing them isn't a helpful process.
Yeah, I sent them. So, but you're probably going to say this is what it's supposed to feel like, but it feels like I'm dwelling on it then.
That is what it's supposed to feel like. That is what I want you to do at this point, because I think that you're trying to bypass the emotional pain of what you've been through the last 9 months. And the loss of your dad is a really big thing. The loss of your friends is a really big thing. The loss of your cat's a big thing. You know, they're significant emotional experiences that you've been through that you've not yet processed. And to move forwards in life, you're either going to carry around this big black sack of all this emotion that's happened, but you're going to be burdened by that, and you're going to go through episodes of depression and feeling hopeless and pointless, or we deal with it. And part of dealing with it is, you could call it dwelling on it, I would call it digesting and metabolizing it. And that means it's a little bit like a meal, like you've got to chew on it. If you try and digest a meal without chewing on it, you get indigestion. And the chewing on it is the talking about it, or it's the writing about it. And yeah, it can feel uncomfortable doing that, but it's better that than not, because at least in that you're starting to process it, and done skillfully and done effectively. When it's done, it's done. It doesn't mean that you don't still have thoughts and you know, regret about losing your dad, but the actual processing of the kind of emotion around it has, much of that then has moved. And I'd be interested to see, you know, I think writing's, I think this could go a little bit either way in a sense. You know, writing is obviously a talent of yours and a joy of yours. And I think that can be a benefit here, but we also want to avoid it sort of been turned into another way of avoiding how you feel by being too clever in a sense.
Well, yeah, that was something I was thinking. I think I would have a tendency to rewrite and edit
try and make it sound witty and
yeah, or or try and make it sound poetic, or try and make it sound,
that's cheating, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm asking you to do.
But I also think that might be
more ammunition to use against yourself.
Yeah.
I think it depends upon the way that you do it. We want to make, part of the reason why I'm sequencing what we're doing in the way that I am is we looked at the inner critic first, because there is a danger that your inner critic hijacks what you're doing here and goes, oh my God, you're being so sorry for yourself and pathetic and weak and this and that. And we need to make sure that doesn't get too much traction. And it's going to happen a little bit, but we need to make sure that it doesn't become fodder for your inner critic to use against you. Mm-hmm. But given we've put a bit of a spotlight on your inner critic, hopefully that alone is enough to sort of see that and go, hang on a second, I'm doing this really vulnerable, sensitive and quite painful thing, and I'm giving myself shit. Like, go gently. I think that hopefully is enough in of itself to catch that. But I think that given talking to friends about it is not so easy at the moment for kind of practical reasons, and writing is a medium that you have some history with, let's say, I think taking some time just to write some of how you feel, and if you're comfortable sharing some of that with me, you can choose what you want to share. I'm not going to just make you hand it over. Like, I think it can also be a private sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I think that can be a good entry point to help opening up some of the feelings around this. How do you feel about that?
I'm reticent.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I'll give it a go.
And the reticence is for the reasons we just talked about, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you feel the reticence is so much that it's going to get in the way of giving it a go, or do you feel that you've got enough clarity and enough willingness to experiment?
I mean, no, I'll give it a go. With the idea of writing these sort of apologies and saying, well, I sent them,
Yeah.
And in a way, it was like, well, they're written, they're made to be read. It's like, or like books or whatever. I tend to think if something's written or concrete or there, then it's either meant to be read or meant to be listened to or meant to be watched.
Yeah, I hear that, although I think there are times where art doesn't have to be shared.
Yeah.
And I think I'm quite a big fan therapeutically of people writing letters to people they don't send, because I think the process of formulating one's feelings and thoughts in a letter is often helpful, but sending the letter is another thing. And sometimes it's really helpful, and other times it's just a whole other shit show, and actually it's better to let it stay private. So my intention here is what I'm interested in is using the writing as a way to connect your mind and heart and sort of express some of that. Mm-hmm. What you do with that is a separate piece in my eyes.
Okay.
What of that you share with me, what of that you share with others. But I think the key sort of step here is starting to put more attention on the feelings that you have about the experiences you've been having.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions you've got?
Not at the moment.
Okay, good. Well, thank you, David. I will see you next time.
I now need to come up with a different Christmas shot.
Hope you found this week's episode helpful. This work that David's doing about really learning to understand his relationship with his emotions is so important. We've been posting, I think, some really helpful, supportive material on my Instagram. So if you haven't already, do check that out. Each day we post little tasters and reminders, some of the key ideas that we're covering here in therapy. Next week, we're going to be catching up with Katie. Katie's had a challenging time over the Christmas period, but has been working really hard to use the tools that she's been learning. And I think we're going to see in the coming months with Katie really the impact of the hard work that's going in now. Here's a taste of what's coming up next week.
Overall, I know that I am connecting with that little girl inside me much, much more.
So much of your life has been about making other people's needs more important than your own. And there's probably a place in you which feels a bit sensitive and almost reactive to giving others compassion.
I put my feelings aside so that I could do that for the kids, and this is how it's ended.